They don't record the first part.
Okay, I hereby call the Board of the Prior Lake Savage Area Schools into session. Call to order, and we'll start out with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All members are present with the exception of Mary Franz tonight. Next on the...
Stacy Rule.
Oh, Stacy Rule. Thank you very much. So we do have quorum. Next on the agenda is the approval for the agenda. Do I have a motion for the approval of the agenda?
So moved.
By Lee. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Ben. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? That passes 5-0. Next on the agenda is the Truth and Taxation portion of our meeting. Presenter tonight is Executive Director of Business Services, Biz Sink.
Good evening. Tonight is the final levy certification, and as part of that certification, we will be reviewing several different items. If I can get this to work here tonight. So as part of the agenda, we'll be reviewing the tax levy calendar, our basic school funding, the factors contributing to the levy change, our certified 17 pay 18 levy, and some graphical analysis. So the authority for school levies must come from either by state formula, the legislators set those state formulas, or they're voter approved. And the basic formula for calculating our state aid is our authorized total revenue minus the local property taxes would be, the remainder would be our state aid. Some impacting factors for the changes, those issues that are driven by our state level, any changes in levies determined by state formula, that would be a legislative change. Changes in our sales ratio impacting our adjusted net tax capacity. Laws mandating any code compliance, such as our long-term facility maintenance. And then there's issues determined by district voters, voter-approved bond referendums or excess levy referendums. And then any local factors, so inflationary pressures on the real estate market, abatements, property improvements not previously taxed, such as new homes, change in an individual assessed market value, and then a possible change in classification, such as the homestead to rental. So what is included in tonight's district levy certification? Those voter-approved referendums, we had some from prior years, and then the most recently approved bond and levy from the November 7th vote. And then levies set by state formula. So there's several listed there, our equity, operating capital, transition. And then we have those levies authorized for local need. And those would be our reemployment insurance, safe schools, career and technical, facility leases, integration, QComp, and OPEB. So as we've talked about, and this hasn't changed since the preliminary levy, but our adjusted net tax capacity increased 3.7%, and the referendum market value increased almost 7%. We are a growing school district, so we have increased pupil units, and that affects our levy as well. Our OPEB, you can see that the board authorized almost $140,000 in retiree insurance, the voter-approved bond and levy from November 7th. This is the market value analysis, and again, this hasn't changed from our preliminary levy. The most recent information we have is from 2016 information, and you can see that our referendum market value in the district continues to increase. And the same is true for our adjusted net tax capacity. And we show both of these items because bonds and levies are spread across either our adjusted net tax capacity or the referendum market value. And so we want to show both of those options here. And then we show our enrollment history and trends, and we continue to show growth, averaging a little over 225 students per year. Here's our preliminary levy certification, and we're showing there are very few changes from the preliminary levy, but I do want to point out those specific ones that have changed. And the first one is the second line, the equity levy. That's gone down when the voters approved our additional operating levy. That increased that amount. And so when you look at our equity levy, that compares us to the 95th, from the 5th to the 95th percentile. And so we increased a little bit, which means we received less money in that area. The other long-term facility maintenance changed slightly. That was an adjustment in our long-term facility maintenance. And then you can see the biggest one is our levy referendums went from 5.3 million to 7.7. So that's an increase of $2.6 million. And then there was a slight adjustment in our leased facilities as well. So overall, in the general fund, that increased 21.48%. For our community service fund, there was no change from the preliminary levy. And then if we look at the debt service fund, there's a slight change. There's a change from the preliminary levy, and I did make an adjustment. I was showing some alternative facilities was shown in the debt service, and it should not have been. It should have been showing in our building bonds. And so I just changed the bucket, in essence, of where that money is showing. So if you look at our building bonds, they're going up an additional $2.5 million from last year. And our long-term facility maintenance went up slightly, about $80,000. And then we did have, we showed on our preliminary levy a reduction in debt excess of about $570,000, and that's reduced now to $482,000. And the reason for that is we have to have 5% in our fund balance. And so that reduction, because our bond amount went up, we have to have 5% of that total bond amount in there. And so that went down slightly, just so we remain at 105% in that account, in that fund by law. And so you can see, due to the voter approved again in that total debt service fund, that one is going up 16.67% from the previous year. But I did show at the very bottom the total dollar difference from the preliminary, and then the additional from the final due to the voter approved building bond and the operating levy, and then the total. So the dollar difference from last year's $5,383,574 for a total increase of 18.57%. And you can see, again, I'm showing each of the funds here, the total general fund, the community service fund, and the debt service fund. A little bit about how this breaks down. 66% of our levy is voter approved. 19% of our total levy is determined by the state, and 15% is at local discretion. Here's our 9-year levy history, going back to 2009-10, and then you can see we've maintained pretty steadily those increases, small increase, either a decrease or a small increase, but this year, due to the voter approved, it did go up significantly, as we expected that it would. Our home values in District 719, the average home value is $326,300, and the median value is $287,900. Here's one of the things that's really different from us than the counties and the cities is that usually when you're levying, this levy is for 2018, and most of the time their budgets are on the same calendar year. And so when they're showing their budget, they're showing the budget that levy affects. For us, the levy affects next year's budget, so the 18-19 school year budget. It does not affect this year's budget, and so you're not seeing any adjustments to our budget due to those items. You will see when we sell the bonds that we'll have to come back and make an adjustment for that piece of that, but as far as the other pieces of that budget, you'll see that in next year's budget. The $250 per pupil unit in the general fund, and then the debt service as well. So this is what was proposed from our work session for the general fund, and you can see that our fund balance is a little over $13.5 million. And that's for the general fund. For the food service fund, that's made some slight changes and additional expenditures. And then our community education fund, we're still within that fund balance of less than 25% as well. And the remaining ones are staying pretty steady. Any questions? I do want to talk about this tax levy calendar. The board must certify a final levy by December 29th, and then the district has to notify the MDE and the county by January 8th of that approval. Any questions? There's a lot of information in here.
Are there any questions from the board for Julie? I have one. Which line items in the final budget do you see that you'll have to come back and do changes for the board based on the bond sale? Which line items in the final proposed budget? Would it be for the long-term facilities maintenance?
It'll be under total building fund on this.
Okay.
That's where we would show the bond proceeds there.
Okay. And when will that come back to the board?
As soon as we sell those bonds.
All right.
And we receive the revenue for those, then we'll know exactly what that is.
All right. Are there any other questions?
I have one, Rich.
Go ahead, Todd.
Is it a true statement that without the referendum dollars, the preliminary budget at 2.36% held steady?
Mm-hmm. It might have been a couple tweaks in there, but it'd be really
okay.
close to that.
So basically, I see the city set theirs at 4 and the county at 3. So we're still under that at 2.3.
Without the voter approved.
3.6 without the voter approved. Yeah.
Without the voter approved.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right. Next on the agenda is the public comment section of our Truth and Taxation meeting. So if there's any members of the public out there in the audience who'd like to come up and speak to the board about the Truth and Taxation, seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. Item number 7. The consent agenda items are considered to be routine in nature and will be enacted by one motion. There's no separate discussion on these items unless a board member or a citizen so requests. Tonight's consent agenda includes the check wire transfer disbursement summary, the bank reconciliation statement, approval of school board minutes from November 13th, when we canvassed the election, and our regular board meeting, and the minutes from our November 27th board work session. It also includes resignations, terminations, and non-renewals, and it also rescinds a position. So do I have a motion for the acceptance of the consent agenda?
So moved.
By Ben, do I have a second?
Second.
By Todd. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? That passes 5-0. Next on the agenda is the resolution for the acceptance of gifts. Tonight we have gifts from Your Cause Corporate Giving Program for Hidden Oaks Middle School, from the Shakopee, Midwauket, and Sioux community to Twin Oaks, and from the Excel High School for Hidden Oaks Middle School, and from Kim Churchill for Hidden Oaks Middle School. Do I have a motion for the acceptance of the gifts?
So moved.
By Melissa. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Lee. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, this is a resolution, so it'll be a roll call vote.
Aye.
Ben?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That passes 5-0. Just a second here. Next on the agenda is Laker Pride, presented by Dr. Stallo.
It is wonderful to see such a full house this evening. And what I'd like to do is while I talk about the amazing staff that are here tonight, I'd invite you to come up front, please. So Workshop Live, teacher leaders, please come forward. All the way up so you can get on camera. You know, it's been really fun the last couple of months. We've had many opportunities to celebrate kids and celebrate amazing accomplishments of kids. And tonight, I am inspired and my heart is incredibly warm because we have adults and staff here tonight who provide those amazing opportunities for our students. So I'm so excited that you're here. We're so excited to show off a little bit and hear about some of the amazing professional development that you've been engaged in through Workshop Live. But I want to share just a little bit more context. One of our district goals this year is really to focus on literacy, to take a look at best practice and to take a look at our own practice and to really say, what is it that we want to do to engage kids? We know students learn differently than they used to learn. We know their needs are different than they used to be. And we have teachers here tonight and teachers around our entire district who are working really hard every day to change and study their own practice so that they are responsive to the needs of our kids. And tonight we have some trailblazers. We have teacher leaders who have said, you know what? I'm going to take a look at my own practice. I'm going to be a little vulnerable. I'm going to invite people into my classroom to watch me transform teaching so that kids are the winners in learning. So I want to thank you all for being here. I know that Kevin and Gwen are going to share more with us about this PD, but I hope you know how inspired I am by you, we are by you, and how grateful I am for your willingness to change what you do because it's best for kids, even if it's kind of scary at times. And I know you're doing it together, which helps, but I know it's still kind of scary at times. So I'm going to go ahead. Kevin, our Director of Teaching and Learning, Kevin Schuttinger, is going to share a little bit more, and I know he's going to be handing off the mic a little bit.
Quickly. Thank you very much, Dr. Stella. I just want to, again, publicly thank all of you for stepping in, stepping forward, and leading. We know just like with kids, we have to change the way kids learn, and we have to change the way we learn and how we learn from each other and how we continually get better. So I am just really, really proud to introduce Gwen Molden, our elementary curriculum specialist. She's new this year. She replaced Patty Green, who was in the district for many, many years. And to say Gwen has hit the ground running is a real selling her short and really selling short the work that she's done in a very short amount of time to really bring this teacher-empowered PD to every single teacher at our elementary level, which is no mean feat. So without further ado, Gwen Molden.
Thank you very much. All right, let's see if I can figure this out. So our teacher-empowered PD has been named Workshop Live. And really, there are three main components, which you're seeing in front of you right now. We have host teachers. We've talked about, we're really celebrating them tonight because they have stepped up as leaders to open up their classroom and invite other teachers to come in and watch their writing workshop in action. Observing teachers are also enjoying and taking part in this amazing professional development. Facilitators, we have joined with peer coaches through the district to help facilitate all this as well. So really, the reason we're celebrating these host teachers tonight is they've stepped up, and in this three-step process, the observation, they've welcomed their colleagues into their classroom, and in the post-observation, they've also welcomed the teachers to ask questions and to really push them in their thinking and to help them to move forward in their practice. So, since it's all about them, we're going to hear the stories from the teachers. So, host teachers.
So I, a few years ago, started working with the writing units of study, and we were able to go to North St. Paul to watch some teachers in North St. Paul teach. And I think that's one of the things that helped push me the furthest in what I was doing in writing units of study. So when Gwen asked for volunteers to have people come watch in our classroom, I volunteered because I know that really pushed my thinking and how I worked as a writing teacher. The writing units of study this year and all of the years has really kind of pushed my students to grow more as writers. And I think being able to have other people observe and discuss what we are doing and collaborate as a team after we're done with the observations has really helped our whole grade level kind of push forward and to make better writers at our elementary school. And I'm Dana, I teach at Westwood.
Hello, I'm Molly O'Halloran, and I'm a second grade teacher at Red Tail Ridge. And I have the unique opportunity to be actually teaching all the second graders this year. And one of the things that I've seen in this curriculum is the amazing stamina these kids have as writers. And it's a very rigorous curriculum, and to see them to step up to the plate and actually try all these new things. I joke a lot with my students by saying, do you feel uncomfortable right now? And if they say yes, I celebrate that, because I tell them if you feel a little uncomfortable, that means you're growing as a student. And I feel like that's mimicking us, our teachers too, because I feel right now we feel a little uncomfortable in this curriculum. And I think so as educators we're growing and the students are growing as well, so.
We also have Sarah, who is going to give our observing teacher perspective.
All right, my name's Sarah, and I teach at Westwood, and it was really great to go into a classroom and see how the writing curriculum works, and being able to talk before and after and collaborate with our team and just be able to develop our teaching skills and make it better for our students, because they are absolutely love writing and they ask to write more and more. So.
I'm Karen Zwolenski, principal at Westwood, and my perspective on this is that experts are in the house. And kudos to these folks and Gwen behind me here. What we are doing speaks to our culture here at PLSAS. This is who we are. Not only are we leaning into being experts, we are leaning into being leaders of instruction, and that is who we are. The second thing, this whole process that Gwen brought to us, along with these teachers, isn't just because it's fun. This is a form of something called micro-teaching, and it is in the top 10 of instructional practices that impact student achievement. There's a reason we're doing this. So great job to everyone on that. And the last thing I want to say is that the enthusiasm that this whole model has it's energized all of us. And the students are watching, and they see us modeling and stepping into discomfort and going, hey, it's okay. My teacher does that too. So kudos to everyone here tonight, and thank you for your support.
We could just give a round of applause to our amazing host teachers. Oh, okay.
We need to make sure, because your students are probably watching this right now. I'm sure they are, and they're probably going to write some amazing pieces about all of you.
My students should be going to bed soon. I'm Shayna Bates, and I teach first grade at Westwood.
I'm Kayla Stormo, and I teach first grade at Greenwood.
I'm Christy Weigel. I teach third grade at Greenwood.
Betsy Shasky, second grade at Red Tail.
Jamie Chilson, and I'm a fifth grade teacher at Five Hawks.
Hansen, I teach third grade at Jeffers.
Miranda Hanstead, I teach fourth grade at Glendale.
Jen Heilman, I teach kindergarten at Glendale.
Lisa Bender, I teach kindergarten at Five Hawks.
Chris Gratz, I teach second grade at Glendale.
Lisa Lozier, I teach fifth grade at Red Tail.
Allison Crooks, I teach kindergarten at Red Tail Ridge.
Molly O'Halloran, second grade at Red Tail.
Dana Neiman, fourth grade at Westwood.
And just one more thing. I, probably because you're
writing teachers have a very special place in my heart. But when I think about we are PLSAS, Hear Our Stories, I know the reason I became an English teacher was to give students voice through their writing. And that's what you're doing. Because there are kids who are going to talk and talk and talk, and there are kids who aren't. And you are providing an opportunity in a safe way for them to find their voice and gain their confidence as writers, which we know turns into every other academic. So thank you. Thank you after a really long day of working and being with kids. Thank you for taking the time to come tonight. Again, I think that speaks to your dedication, your commitment to our school district and our kids. Thank you very much.
So as we are transitioning, we also need to bring it right back to the kids, because really that's why we're all here. So we have the stories from our students.
I see a small board. I see a brown control. I see a colorful board. I have a Alexa. I can see a orange pumpkin. I can see a yellow squash. I can see a brown lotus. I like coloring out a picture.
So as you can see, our writers are thriving, our teachers are thriving, all because of the great place that we work in every day. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is the personnel items. Mr. Matt Mons will present.
All right. Good evening, members of the board and Dr. Stallo. First up this evening, I would like to recommend the following candidates for employment and seeking board approval.
And then in your packet, are there any questions? Or first, do I have a motion for the acceptance of the candidates for employment?
So moved.
By Todd, do I have a second?
Second.
By Lee. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That passes 5-0. Next, the approval of district retirements.
Yes.
Or 6-0, excuse me.
I showed up.
That's fine.
Glad you're here.
Thank you. Check my math. All right. Next up is the approval of district retirements. Mr. Matt Mons.
Yes, so this evening I'm presenting 2 district retirements. The first of which is Connie Osegard, who's been a field technician in the district, has been working out of the district services center here and has been with us for 7 years. And she will certainly be missed in that role. And then secondly is Lana Beam, who has been with the district for 30 years as a paraprofessional at Twin Oaks Middle School. She's been a leader in our special education programming at Twin Oaks. She's been a leader amongst the employees that she's worked with district-wide in the paraprofessional unit. She's somebody that I've had the honor to work with a number of times, whether it was gaining input for settling a bargaining agreement or really when we just needed somebody to step up and be a leader. And so I am tremendously grateful for the time that she spent with us and wish her the very best in her retirement here.
All right. First, do I have a motion for the acceptance of the district retirements?
I'll make that motion.
By Melissa, do I have a second?
Second.
By Ben.
Can I make a note about Mrs. Beam?
Certainly can.
Mrs. Beam made a difference to my children, each one of them, and to my nephew, and her kind, wonderful nature, her spirit, her gift for love for the children, and everything that she did for them. I can't say enough about Lana and what she meant to this district. She'll be missed.
Any others? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0. Next is the approval of the leaves of absence.
Yes, I present the following leaves of absence, and I'm seeking board approval.
Do I have a motion for the leaves of absence?
So moved.
By Todd, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Lee. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0. Next on the agenda is the approval of a 2017-18 additional staffing request.
Yes, so there's an additional staffing request in two different areas here. One is for a 1.0 additional assistant speech coach. We have historic highs in terms of participation in our speech program. So with 25 additional students, they're looking for an additional coach. And we're going to have an especially eloquent student body at the high school, which is always nice to know. And we're also looking for an additional 0.5 assistant dance coach, and that is for supervisory purposes as that position has continued to grow. That position will be funded by boosters and paid by the district.
All right. Do I have a motion for the acceptance for the additional staffing for the 2017-18 school year?
So moved.
By Ben, do I have a second?
Second.
By Stacy. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0. Next, we move on to unfinished business. The 2018-19 school calendar, Executive Director, Assistant Superintendent, Mr. Holmberg.
Good evening. Chair Wolf, members of the board, Dr. Stallo. A month ago, I presented the 18-19 calendar for review, and here tonight seeking board approval.
Do I have a motion for the acceptance of the 2018-19 school calendar?
So maybe.
By Stacy, do I have a second?
Second.
By Todd. Any questions, comments for Mr. Holmberg? Seeing none.
I just want to make
go ahead,
one
Lee.
quick comment. I appreciate that we had 2 readings on this calendar to make sure the public was aware of some changes in the calendar for next year. So thank you that worked.
And the major change is moving spring break to the end of the quarter.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Next is new business. We will adopt the 2017 payable 2018 final levy certification. Executive Director of Business Services, Ms. Sink.
Good evening again. Earlier tonight, you heard the levy, the Truth and Taxation hearing, and I'm seeking approval of the levy certification.
Do I have a motion to approve the 2017 payable 2018 final levy certification?
So moved.
By Lee, do I have a second?
Second.
By Ben. Any additional questions that weren't answered in the earlier session? Ms. Sink? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0. Next on the agenda is the approval of resolutions authorizing the approval of the sale of bonds. We'll have 2 different resolutions, and each will be done on a roll call vote tonight. Presenting is Executive Director, Business Services, Ms. Sink, and representatives from Ehlers and Associates.
Good evening again. Jeff Seeley is here from Ehlers and Associates to discuss the sale of the bonds. You'll have 2 resolutions in front of you tonight. One is for the sale of the coupon bonds, and one is for the sale of the cab bonds. And so Jeff will be going over that, and we are looking at having a resolution for approval and opening up the January 22nd work session to be a board meeting for the approval of those bonds.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and let me start by congratulating you on the successful election. Very nice job. So now that the hard part is over, we move into the bond issuance. So the first part was authorization. Now we're moving into the issuance, and you do have two resolutions in front of you. The first one we're going to deal with is for the current coupon bonds or school building bonds, and we handed out what we call our pre-sale report, and that's the $65 million general obligation school building bond. Of course, the election authorized $109,300,000. So, as you know, there was a lot of discussion on structure and how we were going to finance this particular project, and we've settled on a mix, a blend of what we call current coupon bonds and CABs, or capital appreciation bonds. So the first resolution is with the current coupon bonds, and I'll just hit some of the highlights of this narrative in this report. First of all, these are general obligation bonds, which means you are pledging your full taxing authority into making the payments. It makes them very safe. They're a low-risk investment, which means you get very good interest rates on them. That, combined with the tax-exempt status. The current coupon bonds are a 20-year term, and it's a wraparound schedule. So when you have your existing debt and that's higher, there'll be less money paid towards the new bonds. When you've paid off existing debt, there'll be more money. So the maturities or principal payments start in 2031 and go through 2038. Of course, you pay interest every 6 months on them, and it has a call date. That's a date that we identify ahead of time in which you can have a refunding or refinancing opportunity. Call date of February 1 of 2028. It does qualify for the state credit enhancement program. That is a program where the state will back your bond should there be any default. Again, it improves your credit worthiness. It makes your bonds easier to sell and results in a better interest rate for you. The credit enhanced rating would be a Moody's AA2 rating. You also have a rating called an underlying rating for your existing bonds, and that's currently a AA2. We would have these bonds rated. The rating, you have a very strong rating, okay? And that's going to bring more people into the market, more buyers, and drive the interest rate down. That's a savings for your taxpayers. So the reason we settled on this blend is, and I'm on top of page 2, all the projects that you're talking about, you need a general obligation school building bond, which includes this, and the CABs that we'll talk about later on, in order to pay for all those projects. You know, there are other ways of financing projects, but those projects are limited without a vote, so therefore it's very restrictive. That's why you had to go to vote. You had a larger project. We're doing a lot of things. The general obligation will bring lower interest rates, and unlike some of the other financing options, with a past election, or election that passed, you do have the levy authority to make the payments on the bonds. And this is consistent, our plan, with what we told the public prior to the election. We will do competitive bids. That way we get you the best pricing on that particular day. Now, we are expecting these bonds to sell with a premium. A premium is simply the buyer, the underwriter, who is a purchaser of your bonds, will give you more money than what you're asking for. In this market, we see that on almost every bond that we sell. And the reason they do that is because they give you extra money up front and they raise the interest rate a little bit. It makes the bonds more marketable in this market where interest rates are very low. So if you were a retail investor and buying these bonds and it was and say it was a three-year maturity, and it was giving you 4% interest instead of market of 2.5%. It's more advantageous for you, and therefore it's easier to sell. In return, you actually pay more than 100% of the face value. So you might be paying $102 for a $100 bond, if you will, but you get the higher interest rate. Now, that's an advantage to you because the interest you earn is tax exempt. So not only do you get that higher interest rate, but it's all tax exempt. So therefore, that extra money you pay over the face value goes to you, the district, the issuer. So we expect to see it, we're estimating around $1.3 million. So the resolution you have tonight is what we call a parameters resolution. What it does is it authorizes one board officer and the executive director of business services to authorize the bond sale when we take the bids on the 18th of January on your behalf, if it is within a certain parameter. And that parameter for these bonds is 3.95% true interest cost. Now, on the cabs, it's 3.85. So we set a maximum amount. If the bids come in under that, then Julie and one of the board officers can award the sale on your behalf. Then later on, you ratify it at your next meeting on January 22nd. There's other notes on continuing disclosure, arbitrage monitoring, and who the other professional services are. You can read those if you want, but the schedule. So we have the pre-sale tonight. You're authorizing the resolutions. We'll distribute the official statement, do a rating call before the sale. On January 18th, we will take bids, and they will be awarded based on that parameter resolution. And then on the 22nd, you'll ratify it. And then on February 20th, the money will be transferred and you'll have access to it. So, going through this, jumping to page 5, you can see that this particular series of bonds is $65 million. We did put that $1.5 million premium. You can see that nets you around $65,856,000. In the construction fund, page 6, you can see where it's backloaded. As I mentioned, the maturities or principals are towards the end of the term. It's a 20-year term. Page 7 is where we start giving you a big picture. Both these bonds, this and the cabs. And you can see that the cabs are around $43,611,000, where the current coupon bonds are $65 million. Now, the cabs have been lowered from the pre-sale estimates by about $2 million. Because the cabs, you decide to blend the cabs in there to keep the interest rate lower on the early years, so the tax impact would be less. But as you know, the interest rate is a little higher on cabs because you aren't paying interest as you go. Instead, you accrete interest or accumulate it and pay it when they mature. So when we structured this, as you'll see when we talk about the next pre-sale report, the cab payments are earlier than this first series because the earlier it is, the more we can control the interest rate and the lower it'll be. So with cabs, by accreting the interest, we want those paid earlier than the current coupon bonds. When we sell the bonds, depending on what we get, there's going to be adjustments, and we will try to lower the cabs even more than what we did so far, and they're $2 million less. So the big picture is page 8. You can see we're estimating about 3.35% on the cabs. The current coupon bonds 3.69. There are little squares up here on the upper left side. We did build in the latest numbers on your property valuations. You can see a 9% increase on the net tax capacity. And overall, the adjusted debt levy is about $4 million less than pre-election estimates because the rates are down. Now, these rates are cushioned a little bit. We expect if you sold today, we would get a better rate than these. So they're cushioned a little bit. And then the final thing, well, you can see the graph how it lays out on that with your existing, the red, the lease levy, and then the blue is the proposed. This is all the bonds, the cabs and this series. And then on page 10 is the tax estimate. It's a little less than what we estimated before. Questions about this?
No, why don't we take, there's two separate line items. Why don't we take this first one first? I think you've titled it 2018A. Okay,
Yes.
we'll have that resolution. So do I have a motion for the acceptance of the resolution on the sale of bonds, general $65 million general obligation school building bonds series 2000A? Do I have a motion for the acceptance of the resolution?
So moved.
By Ben, do I have a second?
Second.
By Stacy. Are there any questions or comments?
I just have a couple of questions.
Go ahead, Stacy.
Jeff, I know you had said on this particular bond, you said it's 3.95 total interest cost would be the maximum amount that we'd be looking at for.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm that. And as far as the parameters set, no matter how many bids we get, is there an expectation of how many? I mean, I know before we've gotten like 2 or 3 people bidding.
We would anticipate more. We've been seeing 6 to 8 bids recently.
And so as far as that, we're still held to the fact that if it's under 3.95 and it's acceptable bid by all the parameters, we still must take the lowest bid, correct?
Still take the lowest bid, correct.
All right. I just wanted to verify that. Okay? That's good for me.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I have one question. The sale is slated for January 18th, correct?
That's when we will take bids. If it meets the parameter, then Julie and a board officer will sign it, send the proposal back to the underwriter, and at that point, it's accepted. You do ratify it on the 22nd, just so the board is on record, but it's already been accepted based on this particular type of resolution.
Okay. So I'm thinking ahead, we'll have to have a formal session. We have a study session that night, but we can have an open meeting in a second. Can you talk a little bit about our bond rating, AA2? How many school districts in the state have that bond rating?
A AA2 is better than the majority of districts. The majority of districts, of course, many of them are outstate districts who don't have the economic base right next door that you do within your community, but most are 2 to 3 steps below you. AA2 is a very solid rating for suburban districts. It's actually a very good rating. There are some suburban districts with lower ratings. There's a couple with a AAA, which is higher. But the only ratings higher is a AA1 and a AAA, and there's only a half dozen with AAA, and I don't know exactly how many have a AA1, but you are probably in the upper 1/4%.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right. This is a resolution, so it is a rule. I've had a motion and a second, so this is a resolution. Roll call vote. Ben?
Aye.
Alyssa?
Aye.
Stacy?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That passes 6-0. Next is the approval of the resolution authorizing the sale of general obligation school building bond series 2018B.
Yes, and again, you have a pre-sale report. Much of this is the same as the narrative in the last pre-sale report. I will highlight the differences. This part is the capital appreciation bond section, and the term is a 13-year. Payable in 2022 through 2031. Again, I mentioned it's a shorter term. We move those up because we're concerned that will generate too much interest if those were backloaded like the others. So again, a competitive bid. On the parameters, we have a 3.85 true interest cost as the parameter. Again, the January 18th, bids are taken. Signed off on if it meets the parameter, and then January 22nd ratified by the board. So it's the same schedule, same process. Not much else different. You can see page 6. There is the estimated payment schedule. And again, the actual payment schedule will be determined when we take bids. The low bid, we'll do some adjustments at that time.
Okay. Do I have a motion for the acceptance of the resolution for the approval of the General Obligation School Building Bond Series 2018B?
So moved.
By Lee. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Todd. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, this is a roll call vote because it's a resolution. Ben?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye. That passes 6-0.
All right, thank you very much. You have a good night.
Next on the agenda is new courses and secondary registration guide, presented tonight by Director of Teacher and Learning, Mr. Schuttinger.
Good evening, board members.
Good evening.
I'm here to present and share some new course proposals for 2018-19 for the middle school and high school level, and I seek board action tonight. The course development process starts when teachers submit a course proposal that then goes to the site administrator for review. And then it's brought to the District Curriculum Advisory Committee to get feedback and further review. And then once past that committee, it comes to the board for approval. And if these courses are approved, they will be in the course registration guide for students to choose for the next year's courses. At that point, if enough students do register, the course runs. And we begin the course development process. And that really is an intensive process going from January to summer when we develop the course, map out each unit according to the standards addressed in the course, and then get it ready for fall. In Prior Lake High School, we have a few courses, mainly in the Family and Consumer Science Department, the Health and Physical Education Department, and the Social Studies and English Department. Of special note is that Social Studies English course, that's a cross-curricular course that is a partnership between an English teacher and a social studies teacher that really seeks to integrate ELA and English standards with the social studies standards to bring more powerful intertwined learning to kids. So we're excited about the prospect of that course. And there's also not so much of a new course, but a change to offer AP Psychology at Prior Lake High School that's currently only offered at MinCaps, and we want to make that available to students at Prior Lake High School as well. In Hidden Oaks and Twin Oaks at our middle schools, we have 3 new courses in the FACS department. These are updates. The FACS department is in the curriculum review and development process, and these courses are deeply intertwined with the project-based learning work that we're engaging in K-12 in the district, and they're all really designed to give students more hands-on experience with the design process, with the creation and development process, and you see that 8th grade course is kind of a culminating course at the middle school where they really have a lot of freedom to design their own creations and bring it to life. So it's an exciting opportunity as well. That personal performance class in the physical education department is really a personalized class focused on individual fitness at the 7th grade level. We've seen lots of success with that at the 8th grade level, with students really learning individual ways to promote fitness and health on their own. And so we're really hopeful for this class to run and be successful for kids as well. We also have some changes to the MinCaps program and integration. The current model works with a 2-tiered business pathway course. So in this current model, students only have one on-ramp into the business pathway. They can begin with year 1, and then only after completing year 1 can they take year 2. Eric Sill, our new administrator at MinCaps, has proposed a new model in which there are more on-ramps into a diversified series of pathways for MinCaps. So there's a design and marketing pathway, there's a marketing analytics pathway, a foundations of business pathway, and a professional selling pathway. So students don't necessarily have to have completed the first pathway in order to access the second, and vice versa. The Foundations of Business pathway, we have just a different combination of courses, some slight changes here. You see Intro to Business, AP Micro Econ, and College Freshman Comp. These are college level classes that also satisfy high school requirements. And in semester 2, there's an entrepreneurship elective as well as more macro econ and public speaking. In the marketing and analytics pathway, we have business finance, AP stats, and marketing concepts and strategies in semester 2, along with AP stats continuing. And in the professional selling pathway, we have a new course, Introduction to Selling, that will be offered as a CIS course through Hennepin Tech, a business communications course, and in semester 2, a consultative selling course and an interpersonal communications course. So again, intertwining the learning as well as giving requirements both for college and high school. And the design and marketing pathway, we have marketing concepts and strategies, fundamentals of graphic design through Hennepin Tech, that's a new course, creative writing, digital marketing course, an applied graphic design course, and an interpersonal communications course. And then lastly, in that global sustainability pathway, we have environmental science, principles of macro econ, interpersonal communication, as well as environmental science, continuing controversial global issues, and college freshman comp in the second semester. We're also reviving an education pathway where we have a lot of students who we think may be interested in this pathway and in exploring teaching as a career or getting some of that early experience in high school. So we have AP Psych offered as a part of that pathway, preschool child development, English 12, and then AP Psych, our PALS class, which is a collaborative venture between our older students and our younger students, and then English 12. Any questions on these new courses or pathways?
Any questions from the board? Nope, none at this point.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Yeah. Do I do that? Oh, go ahead, Mr. Holmberg.
Oh. We'd like to request action to move forward with the courses to offer them in the registration guide to students next year.
Yes, I see that. I was just looking at, in our packet, didn't they have, you talked about a new course process for the secondary, and I thought you would explain a little bit about that.
Oh, sure. I can go back to that.
That's why I was delaying just a tad.
Oh, surely. The new course development process, so that's just kind of an overview. It's really just an alignment with our resources and time. We in former years, we would have those courses be developed during the summer once they were approved and kids were registered for them. But what we found is that leaves teachers without the support they need to really develop that class and get it ready in time for the fall. So we've just kind of slid things forward a bit so that once these classes are approved by the board and are placed in the course registration guide, students register. And as soon as we are confident that the course is going to run, we start working with the teachers to start development of the courses, whether that's maybe some release time during the day or whether that's working after school or before school. Maybe it's some time carding for the teachers to work and develop the units outside of the school day. But we really just try to slide that unit development, the curriculum development of the course to spring so that we can use our teaching and learning staff to support that process with the teachers. So no changes, a slight change in timelines.
So do I have a motion for the acceptance of the new courses in the secondary registration guide?
So made.
By Stacy, do I have a second? By Todd. Are there any additional questions for Mr. Schettinger or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 All those opposed? That passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, the short-term capacity and enrollment presentation. Mr. Holmberg, Assistant Superintendent.
Good evening again. This evening, I'm just going to be going over a short recap and talking about short-term capacity enrollment planning. At the November 27th work session, as a board, you started a conversation on looking at short-term capacity enrollment planning relative to the next couple of years as we start talking a little bit about construction and bringing some of those buildings online to address some of our facilities needs. And so this evening, I'm going to kind of lead through a short recap of the November 27th meeting, but then also kind of talk a little bit about the strategies and some of the things we're going to be, that you'll be talking about as a board moving forward. But ultimately, at the end of this presentation, we did have a discussion around open enrollment, and we're bringing forward a recommendation based on a discussion that evening that we'd like the board to take action on so that we can move forward to communicate with families and kind of help us get ready with that registration process that families are looking at regarding the 18-19 school year. So with that, and again, the first couple slides are really the outcome of what we talked about on the 27th, but really looking at our elementary short-term capacity issues from now until 2020, 2021. One of the things we shared that evening is that in meeting with representatives from PLA, it is still an active mine site, and one of the things that they shared with us is though their mining operation, they're committed to working with the district on the sale of that land and formalizing a purchase agreement. They are taking a little bit longer to mine that property, and so that does delay that. The district, pending a successful purchase agreement from taking ownership. But as you'll see in the construction phasing plan in the next board topic, we have factored that into our overall planning. But looking at short-term capacity, that was a lens that we brought forward in facilitating a conversation with you on the 27th, really about how can we continue to educate students, knowing that we're a growing district, and continue to create space and look at different strategies and solutions in order to get through the short term while construction's happening. And so we talked a little bit about student enrollment projections for the next couple of years, looking at those strategies and tools, and then ultimately providing direction to administration regarding open enrollment for 18-19. The parameters at the October work session for this exercise came from the board in really three main areas. Is that as we look at elementary students, ensuring that they have a similar experience relative to capacity. And we know that our schools are overcrowded, some more so than others, but to the extent possible, try to maintain or try to bring some of the gaps of overcrowding a little closer together. To the extent possible, we know that the next couple of years will be some transition, most likely transition. And some families may need to move as we go through this process, but in that event, minimize families moving twice, short term and with the opening of the new elementary school in the future, which, as we know, or maybe we don't know, but it's a good reminder this evening, but when we're looking at opening a brand new elementary, all of the boundaries, attendance boundaries within the district will be reshifted across the board to equalize that enrollment. And as we talk about students and families in our district, we're talking about students who are here via open enrollment, in-district transfer, students that are attending other schools within the district, and resident students. And then also knowing too that open enrollment and attendance boundaries, as the board has those conversations, those decisions can come at different times. And so this evening with open enrollment, again, I know it's December, but we have a lot of families and a lot of our internal processes that are getting ready for registration and preparing for the next school year. And so this is very timely that we started to have this conversation. And then boundary changes will take a little bit more work at the next upcoming board meetings and board work sessions on that topic. So really, what we went over that evening is as we look at short-term capacity planning, there's several different things that as a district we can do in order to address some of the current crowding, and as our enrollment would continue to come in, we can continue to use space in the short term, even though for the long term that's not the desired use of the building. So one of those is utilizing existing spaces such as computer labs or non-traditional teaching stations, construction of additional classrooms, looking at class size averages. Certainly open enrollment is a strategy, and we also talked about the budget impact of looking at our current model of open enrollment relative to a more restrictive approach to open enrollment as well as a least restrictive. Placing programs in different sites is also a strategy we'll be talking more in depth in the future, as well as boundary changes, possible boundary changes, looking at the next couple years in the next couple meetings. That evening we did spend probably the lion's share of the meeting talking about open enrollment, looking at current open enrollment in our elementary sites. One of the requests of the board was looking at open enrollment by building and by grade, and then associate the budget impact with that of a more restrictive, a least restrictive, and then really where we're at currently with open enrollment for the 17-18 school year. And so with that, that's like I say, the conversation went a lot longer than what I'm kind of bringing together here in a couple minutes. But these are really some real thought. The board really had a rich discussion around short-term planning and being very thoughtful moving forward. And so more to come, certainly, as we have upcoming board work sessions on those, to continue that conversation on short-term capacity. But this evening, we are requesting board approval around open enrollment, with really in two areas. Restricting open enrollment to 75 students in kindergarten for the 18-19 school year, and then restricting open enrollment to 1% new students allowed at grades 1 through 12. And so in relation to this year, it would be the same open enrollment restrictions that we have in 17-18 for 18-19. So I'll come to the next step. I can go over next steps before I come back for.
Why don't you do that?
Board action. So, you know, pending approval tonight, as I mentioned, we would be moving forward to communicate and implement the action regarding open enrollment for 18-19, and then in subsequent work sessions, future board meetings, we'll be talking about those other strategies on capacity planning and enrollment for the next couple of years for our students. With that, I'll come back to the open enrollment.
All right. So we have a resolution before us. I will read the major portions. Whereas the school board seeks to maintain continuity of programs, curriculum, and services through consistent student enrollment, and whereas the school board recognizes that sufficient student enrollment ensures high-quality course offerings to resident students as well as students enrolling under the Enrollment Options Program, and whereas the state of Minnesota has established an enrollment options program permitting students to attend non-residence districts, Minnesota Statute 124D.03, and whereas the state of Minnesota has also established criteria for school districts to approve or deny open enrollment applications based on capacity of a program, class, or school building, Minnesota Statute 124D.03, Subdivision 6, and whereas, in accordance with Minnesota Statute 124D.03, Subdivision 2, a board may, by resolution, limit the enrollment for non-resident pupils in its schools or programs according to this section to a number not less than the lesser of 1% of the total enrollment at each grade level in the district, excluding kindergarten in 2018-19. Be it therefore resolved that open enrollment guidelines are as follows. Restrict open enrollment to 75 students in kindergarten for the 2018-2019 school year, and limit the open enrollment to 1% new students in each of the grade levels 1 through 12. Do I have a motion for the acceptance of the resolution?
So moved.
By Lee. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Todd. Any questions or comments for Mr. Holmberg?
I just have a quick question.
Go ahead, Stacy.
You know, if this goes forward as read, the same basic lottery, the steps, everything that we did last past year will basically be on the same timeline as far as for families?
That's correct. So last year with the board taking action on open enrollment, Julie and her staff, because we have centralized enrollment, really worked with building principals and site leads to talk about process and procedures and communication to go to families. So those are things that would happen. I think one of the things that's different this year is with the board taking action tonight, you're approximately 2 months ahead of time from when action was taken the last time. So from the standpoint of communicating to families, preparing our kindergarten registration materials, you know, we're earlier, so we're certainly would be more proactive with our communication, but our process and procedures would remain largely the same. There would be a timestamp element, you know, they would be on a list, a waiting list, a lottery, all of those types of things as we go through that.
And we'll update the website with the results from tonight's meeting and then put direction on there as well.
Okay, and this is ahead of, like, don't our open houses start in January? So
They do,
we'd be able
third
to
week of
talk in
January.
detail to families and explain it? Okay.
Ben.
Clarification on the 1%. So if there's 600 students, say, in grades 1 and grades 2, does that mean we'd allow at most 6 per grade level? Or if there's 3 in grade 1, would we allow 9 in grade 2? Is Sum of 1%, or is it 1% max at a grade level based on the enrollment?
It's 1% at each grade level based on that enrollment.
Okay. Thank you.
So as we look at that, and Julie can speak to this more, but this year, you know, as when open enrollment applications were coming in, we had some grade levels that we had more than that six students or 5 students, and so there were waiting lists on some of the grade levels and not on others, just depending on where students and families came in the registration process.
Dr. Stallo.
And that was the note that I was just going to make, that even with that restriction of 1% at each of the grade levels 1 through 12 last year, we had several grade levels that we didn't even have enough interest to have 6 students at particular grade levels come in. Well, we had some with waiting lists who didn't come in.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Right. Ben, go ahead.
Right, go ahead.
Or did you finish? You started.
Well,
and you get to finish.
I did. I finished that question thought. And you go
okay.
Follow
Melissa.
I think we talked at length about this. I see that the number one tool we have to controlling overcrowding is, over the next 2 years, is open enrollment, this open enrollment option. We talked about numbers. We're now at 103 capacity, and that includes repurposing every nook and cranny that we've got. If you ask every teacher, every student, every parent, we are overly jammed, and therefore, that was the basis of the referendum. Our K-3 is the highest percentage of in-district growth, and on average, we have 1% to 2% in-district growth. These are some of the numbers that I got. Our kindergarten class at 625. Last year, it was the highest kindergarten class we've ever had. So we are full. And then to top it off, at our study session, as you mentioned, Jeff, 2 weeks ago, we learned of the unforeseen delay in building the new elementary due to the unsecured agreement. So I take that as the icing on the cake. There's no way that we should consider having 75 new kindergartners from outside of our district. We have to utilize every bit of our existing resources to the Lakers that are right here and to the resources that we have. So I believe it's in our best interest from what I'm hearing in the community that we need to use the most restrictive in open enrollment.
Any other questions or comments?
I guess
go ahead.
I remember from our from our work session, I thought the greatest enrollment or increase in enrollment was at the older grades. Was that? Did I misunderstand that, Julie? Do you remember?
At our 6th grade.
At 6th grade, it's high.
Our largest resident growth this year.
Okay, and isn't it true that the 75 that we allowed in last year were absorbed into the district without any issues? We could handle that many kids coming in?
When you went through the open enrollment process, we didn't allocate any open enrolled students to either Red Tail Ridge or Westwood this year.
Okay, so they went to other schools where there was space.
We went to the schools that we did have space at.
Okay. And if we limit the open enrollment this year, that will impact every year afterward. I believe, my understanding is it would be hard to make up those 75 kids or whatever number it is as years go forward.
At 75 students, according to the demographic study conducted by Hazel Reinhardt, we would reduce our open enrolled students down to about the same number of students that we have going out. So right around that 725 to 750 students.
So we basically maintain our enrollment. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Todd? I'll say something here. We did have extensive discussion about this at our last study session, and we did talk about Hazel Reinhardt's, and as Julie pointed out, we do have the space available, and maintaining that 75 at kindergarten levels maintains that open enrollment balance that we have within the district. So, all right. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, this is a resolution and requires a roll call vote. Ben?
Aye.
Melissa?
Nay.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That passes 5-1. Next on the agenda is the referendum construction phasing plan. A report from Assistant Superintendent Holmberg.
Good evening. I'm glad you have your board packet in front of you because this is a little bit harder to see on the screen. But I think Jeff Seeley from Ehlers said it best when he mentioned congratulations on the successful referendum. I'm happy to be able to share this construction phasing plan with you this evening. This is the outcome of all the work of the Facilities Task Force, the Facilities Committee, and ultimately the community's approval of the referendum moving forward. In essence, this is where the rubber does hit the road as we start talking about the future for Prior Lake Savage Area schools with construction and building. And so, as you can see here, or look very closely, we've got our entire construction project on what's called a Gantt chart, which is an overall timeline of the construction process and the components associated with that. The design phase, the bidding phase, construction, and then ultimately the occupancy phase for all of these for the construction here. There are 2 architects that are working on the projects. Nexus and DeVetter are working with several of our elementaries, Five Hawks, Glendale, Jeffers, Redtail, Westwood, and then both middle schools in Grainwood. And then Nexus and Wold architects and engineers are working on the new elementary school, Bridges ALC, and then the components, the construction components at Prior Lake High School. So this evening I'm presenting this to you as a board so that this is the work that we're going to be starting. And then to talk a little bit here too from a design phase, that is the planning of the additions, looking at the concepts, and that's also the inclusive part where we're going to be bringing site groups together to get input on the concepts and the design moving forward, and then being that communication loop at each site, and then ultimately leading to the bidding phase, construction, and occupancy. And so I foresee that at upcoming board meetings, regular and work sessions, we will be having regular updates, bringing you regular updates on the process, on the projects, on the bids, of course, since they're all board approved, and then ultimately the work moving forward. One of the other things we are anticipating is our Facilities and Finance Committee meetings. Those will be happening more frequently. Just looking at the scope of the projects that are associated here, that's going to be a group where we're going to be having discussions around the projects. We do have several board reps on that committee as well, and that will be a process step of going to the Facilities Finance Committee before coming to the school board. So we'll have those feedback loops, making sure that the board is up to speed as well. And I know too that Christy will be at an upcoming meeting, will be talking about the communications around the status and the updates of the projects moving forward so that our community can follow along with the construction process as well.
All right.
So with that, I'm not seeking action, just presenting this for review.
Will you take some questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, do we have any questions from the board?
Well, I have kind of
Go
a
ahead,
curious
Lee.
question. Under the new elementary, you've got the design phase and then there's a break?
Yes.
Why is that?
So from January to March, we're going to be working with PLA on a formal purchase agreement. And so the purchase agreement, we will work with their attorneys to draft that. And then subsequently, we'll bring that to the board for review and then ultimately action. And then the purchase agreement is the formalized document with associated timelines, price, status of the site, when the district takes ownership and when the district pays Prior Lake Aggregates the amount of dollars. So we'll have all of those formalized components. And then so once that purchase agreement, that's what those the
Okay.
3 months of blue there. Then there's a little bit of a cooling off period before we get the design team up and running.
I have one other comment, Rich.
Go ahead.
I appreciate this.
Yeah.
I think this is something we've all been waiting to see and worked hard to get to, and I'm hoping the community kind of tunes into this because this would be a great way to keep track of where their money's going and all the hard work to get here. So thanks for getting this started.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ben.
I absolutely agree. I think the being able to put a timeline and kind of a hard date to opening, kind of setting some of the The ball's in motion is a great thing. One question I did have is there a way to assign a classroom space or a pupil space that each project will have for it? So for example, with Red Tail, I think there's a couple of classrooms that are being built that will open then in September of next year. Is it a, say 50 pupils or whatever, that like what's the capacity update or upgrade that each of these buildings will get, so we're able to kind of put that to work in our minds as far as the capacity that we're seeing increase and the capacity we're building to for future?
It's a great question, and it's a complicated answer too, because as we know, when we look at for Jeffers Pond and Red Tail Ridge, we're factoring those in as 4 additional classrooms, 2 at each site in the short-term planning, but ultimately the long-term planning, we will factor them into the intended usage. Even though it's short-term, we're going to be going into some of those non-traditional spaces. We'll certainly do that. I don't think it belongs here on this chart, but we'll certainly bring that together when we have the concepts come forward as far as what the remodeling will look like or the additions will look like. And then we'll be updating, I guess the long-term capacity or the capacity components of saying, once this is built, this will be the capacity of the building. So that will all be updated and brought forward.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions or comments? I have one. In the design of medical equipment, they require you to do some user experience testing. And this referendum passed with strong community support and a strong mandate to improve the buildings. So how will the community be involved, especially with regards to the design phase? Will they have opportunity for feedback and input?
So, looking at these, at the projects, there will be, as we look at our core design team, there will be site teams comprised of district stakeholders and also parent and community reps. And so as we look at the projects, the smaller the project, the more quick of a turnaround and a smaller group, but there will be parent input in that. As you look at something like the high school, which is a bit more complex, there's going to be a high school core team. There'll be an activities area core team, a kitchen and servery and commons area core team. There will be a classroom pod core team, and what's the other? Yes, thank you. Office and entrance core team, and all of those will have deeper layers of stakeholder engagement, including parents and community members serving on those input to the process.
What about the users? The students, the high school students.
They will too.
We will certainly have students on, we're looking for a couple of students to serve on the core team and then branch out to those other subcommittees. Certainly, I would imagine the kitchen and servery students will want to will give some input on that in addition to the classroom. And as you think about the activities subgroup, certainly we're talking about athletes and coaches, and other co-curricular activities who will be using that space in the long term as well.
That might be a good opportunity for our student rep to bring that back to the student council and look to help.
What I'd like to suggest is that as we get into an upcoming, most likely, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, our January work session, is providing an overview, because by that time we'll be into our core group and our subgroups and identifying individuals who will be serving on those. And that will give the board a sense of what that public engagement looks like. And if it's not January, it will certainly be by February.
And one final one, will this be on the district website, this Gantt chart with updates?
Yes, I think I'll work with Christy to ensure that we start to create a space for people to go to see the updates, as well as look at this construction phasing plan.
Right. And a communication plan? I'm sure they'll see it as they drive by. So, okay, that concludes. Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Holmberg? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the 2017-18 budget approval, presented tonight by Executive Director of Business Services, Ms. Sink.
Good evening one more time. Tonight we will be reviewing the final budget and the enrollment discussion for the current school year. Back in June 12th of 2017, the board approved an enrollment budget of $85.47 for students in grades K through 12, and then an enrollment of early childhood special education of 42 students. And we're updating those numbers slightly for the K-12 to $85.54 and our early childhood special education to 68. And these are average daily membership numbers. So when we think about early childhood special education, they only attend our schools for portions of the day or hours of the day. So we have many more students, numbers of pupils who are actually here in the district. But when we accumulate their total time, it ends up being that 68 is what we're anticipating. So we're looking at a total enrollment for early childhood through grade 12, 8,622 students. And so the additional revenue based on those student counts will be additional $382,041. Our special education, I do want to talk about that just a little bit. I brought forward about $389,000 at the board work session, and after much review of that, we reduced that down to just $83,666. So that is a reduction from what I've shown you and presented to you at the board work session. And mainly that is because when we look at our special ed, what's not included in the budget, in the revenue budget, is that tuition billing that we will see a reduction in February. So we're making an estimate at this time of what that tuition bill will be. And as soon as we know what that is, if we're anywhere really close, which we hope we are, we'll leave this as it is. But if we're seeing some major changes in our tuition billing, then we'll bring that forward again. Additional fees collected from students for activities for $45,400 and increased admissions to events of $26,900. We have some increased federal funding, special ed funding, and Title I carryover of $521,451, and you'll see a corresponding expenditure. An increasing third-party billing of $116,000 in the revenue, and you'll see again a corresponding expenditure for that. We have TRA, PERA special funding situation, and this is a GASB requirement, Governmental Accounting Standing Board requirement, and so that's $248,090, and you'll again see a corresponding expenditure. The min caps, because we have additional staffing provided by Prior Lake Savage Area Schools, that's showing in our revenue budget of $300,000 because when we split that 50-50 with Lakeville School District, they'll now owe us a little bit more money than the past. They had some of the staffing that they hired and we paid them. So it's still a 50-50, but we're now seeing the revenue come in because we have the expenditure. The solar garden is $100,000 in revenue, and you'll see that corresponding expenditure. And then because interest rates are increasing, we're seeing additional interest revenue of about $54,622. So we're seeing about little over $1.8 million of additional revenue for the district. But we also have some corresponding expenditures, some additional staffing that's been approved since July 1 of $206,805. Then you're seeing this increased federal funding of $521,451 for Title I and federal funding carryover. We do have some site and department carryover that will come from our fund balance for these expenditures of $349,499, and the same for staff development and curriculum carryover. This is coming from our fund balance. That is dollars that were unexpended from last year's budget. So we have allowed those to carry over and to be used in the current year of $471,618, and some district-wide operating capital of $195,000. Again, that's coming from our operating capital fund balance. Increased third-party billing, $116,000, that TRA, PERA special funding situation. And here's where you're seeing the additional programming to min caps for our Prior Lake Savage staff of $204,419. We do have some increased substitute teacher costs of $156,500, solar gardens of $100,000, a salary and wage adjustment from what was brought forward in the preliminary budget of $306,805 and some additional Q comp expenditures of $75,562. So a total increased expenditures of $2.9 million, a little over $2.9 million. So you can see the summary. We're spending more than we have in revenues by a little over $1 million, but our fund balance still is above our unassigned fund balance percentage. It's still at 13.62%. And so our district is, we're purposefully spending that down so that we are within our fund balance policy. And you can see the restricted funds, those, as you remember, restricted can only be used for what those intended dollars are used for. And you can see that most of those dollars are coming from our fund balance, just for that, because that's why it's overspent in that area. So this is what our revised general fund budget looks like, and you can see that $13,565,000 at the very bottom right corner. And again, this is difficult to see if you don't have the sheets in front of you because it's a lot of numbers, but we are taking the audited balances, adding in the revenues and the transfers, and subtracting out our expenditures and our transfer out of funds to get our totals. And then this was our preliminary budget, so if you wanted to do some comparison of where things were back in June to today. And then for our revised budget update, we did have some additional expenditures in food service, but that fund balance is still just under $890,000. Our community education is spending down some of their fund balance as well, and that's intentional as well. Our building fund, again, we'll see any changes in that due to the sale of the bonds will be showing in that building fund. Then our debt service and internal service fund and our OPEB remain the same from our preliminary. Any questions?
First of all, why don't I take a motion to approve the final 2017-18 budget? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
By Ben, do I have a second on that motion?
Second.
By Todd. Are there any questions or comments for Julie? Seeing none, we've gone over this many, many times. It wouldn't be a meeting if we didn't talk about the budget. So without any other questions or comments, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the transportation update and approval. An update was provided at our study session on November 27th, board study session, and board action is now requested. Mr. Delwell.
Good evening, Chair Wolf, School Board, Dr. Stallo. Have before you a memorandum of changes to a Minnesota state statute for us to utilize a right turn lane for loading and unloading of school children as a safe alternative to using the stop arm and 8-way flashers. We're requesting 21 stops to identify for us to use this. I have called around to other districts nearby. Our nearest neighbors to the east have identified 282 such stops. New Prague has them. I did not hear back from Shakopee. Lakeville has them too. It truly is a safe alternative to trying to manage with out using our 8-ways. One thing, I did some research. We've had 6 stop arm violations where we were able to capture license numbers this year so far, and others where we couldn't. Again, this is for safety.
Okay. First, are there anything else, Mr. Delwell, for right now? I'll take the motion first, and then if they have any questions. Okay, do I have a motion first for the approval of the stop protocol for buses in the right-hand turn lane? Do I have a motion by Stacy? Do I have a second for that motion? Second. By Todd. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Delwell? Lee.
Just clarification, so if they're in the right turn lane, the way this reads, I'm not sure if they, let's say the same statute allows for loading and unloading of students without the flashers when they do not cross the street or highway. Do they have to have both not crossing the highway and be able to pull off the traveled portion of the road?
Yeah, we pull off
Is
the
it one or
traveled
the other?
section. It's both. We pull off the traveled section in the right turn lane, use the 8 ways, and in no case does the students cross the road at that point.
Okay, so both things have to be, that has to be that situation for both things. Okay. What if it's a bypass lane?
We don't stop in bypass lanes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Stacy.
And this is current practice, right? And
This has been ongoing for many, many years, but
Right.
the change in statute makes us have to identify the stops and
Okay.
be board approved.
And safety experts obviously have, said
It's-
this is a preferred method.
It's common and best practice.
Okay.
In some situations.
Ben.
Yeah, I think when you brought this up at our study session as a parent, I was taken aback as far as like this is something that we would do. It seems like my initial thought would be all traffic would stop until there's no kids, but
right.
Seeing as we do it, the highway patrol in the state regulates it. It's mandated now to identify the stops that it's that it is safe practice. I'm supportive of moving it forward. Obviously, it just took a second for me to understand the intention of doing it is thinking of my daughters getting off the bus without all traffic stops. So.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, and in your packet you have a list of all the stops that are
21.
identified.
Yep, 21 stops.
And it's a good, a little personal, I think it's a good idea that we have the same rules for every stop in this situation. We don't have a specialization rule or an addendum to a rule for a special stop. So if we ever have a change in drivers, there's no confusion on these stops. So, and again, this decision was made with the utmost safety of our students in mind.
Safety is our top concern.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the board approval for adding a bus stop. Mr. Delwell, again.
Right. So Glendale neighborhood is very congested. The pickup and drop off is really difficult. So I'm proposing we try adding stops in there, not just one, but stops to kind of help see if we can capture some of the 59 walkers that are assigned to that school district. And our hope is that we eliminate congestion and make it a safer pickup and drop off.
Okay. Do I have a motion for the approval of the adding of the bus stop for Glendale?
So made.
By Stacy, do I have a second?
Second.
By Todd. Are there any questions for Mr. Delwell?
So you're just adding stops, you're not adding buses?
Correct. There's no equipment add, just
So
stops.
it shouldn't be an additional cost then?
It should be no extra cost to district.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? I have one. Will you be working with Principal Molitor on a communication plan for the parents?
Correct. And our hope would be to roll this out right after the winter break.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? This passes 6-0.
Thank you. Finally.
Next on the agenda, is the approval of the advertisement for the district roofing bid. Again, presented by Director of Operations and Transportation, Mr. Delwell.
Thank you. So this, the final, if you'll look at your packet, you should see a map of our remaining roof sections. And you can see we have a little bit of roof, or about a third of roof at Five Hawks, maybe a quarter at Greenwood, and just a small little piece at Glendale. And that will complete all of our roofs. And so if you look at the years that the roofs were added, we have 30 years of warranty. If we add on 30 years to, let's say, Edgewood, so we're warranted until 2036, and these roofs should last over 40 years. So we are in great shape for roofs. And so I'd like to thank the board for their action in the past and in the future on our roofs. So this is long-term facility bond money. It's been a board approved, facility committee reviewed. And if you look at the schedule, we would like to get in the newspaper on Saturday, December 16th, Saturday, December 23rd. We would have a mandatory pre-bid walkthrough. Bids would be due February 1st, 2018. Bid opening, we would have board approval on the 12th, begin construction on June 8th, and substantial completion on August 31st of 18. The advantage for us is that if we get out sooner than later, we have in the past and can expect better pricing. We get on contractors' lists early. That has been our practice, and it's worked out very well for us.
Okay. First of all, do I have a motion for the approval of advertisement of the district roofing bid?
So moved.
By Todd. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Lee. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Delwell?
I
Lee?
do have one. When it says mandatory pre-bid meeting, is it mandatory that we offer that, or mandatory that the people that want to bid on it?
It's mandatory that any bidder has to make that meeting.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Go ahead, Todd.
And all these are within state statutes and guidelines like we always do with all of our bids.
Correct.
Any other questions, Melissa?
Will the bid submissions be electronic?
Mr. Delwell?
No, not at this time.
I know that we had some question about that before. Would that be in the district's best interest to do it electronically?
This is using the accepted process that we've used for all our bidding processes for the roof. In the January study session, January study session, we will be reviewing that bidding process. So, are there any other questions or comments for Mr. Delwell? Go ahead, Stacy.
Jim, I just want to, when I first got on the board, this map here was lit up like a Christmas tree as far as colors and everything needing to be replaced. So I just want to thank you and your group's commitment for doing this. I think it's commendable that we'll be having 30 years of guaranteed roof.
Right. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I'm going to follow up with Stacy that that our roofs will last. Students aren't even born yet. We'll still be using that roofs before we have to re-roof. So
yeah,
thank you for your department, your hard work. So any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor of the approval of the advertisement bid for district roofing bid signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0.
Thank you.
There is no policy for this evening, so we move on to administrative reports. Superintendent report, Dr. Stallo.
Excellent. Thank you. At Prior Lake Savage Area Schools, our mission is to educate all learners to reach their full potential as contributing and productive members of our ever-changing global community. And tonight, I would like to highlight a bit of the work that helps us achieve this mission. First of all, as part of our continuous improvement efforts aligned to our strategic direction to engage parents, families, and community to strengthen a culture of respect and inclusion, we will be continuing our process of conducting a community stakeholder survey with the help of the Morris Leatherman Company. This is a random sample phone survey that will include both parents and non-parents who live in our district boundaries. We'll conduct the survey either in late January or February using many of the same questions that we've used in the past to help us gauge how we're doing and to inform our continuous improvement efforts. In addition to that community survey, we also are in the process of taking a look at the survey that we did with staff, students, and parents last year, and we'll also do that survey again later on in the spring. We'll be hosting a kindergarten information session on January 4th from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock at Greenwood Elementary. The event will be for parents of incoming 2018-19 kindergarten students. Parents will learn about our kindergarten program as well as our kindergarten Loyola del Lago Spanish immersion option, and they will also receive curriculum and enrollment information. I'd like to extend congratulations to Russ Reitz, our Activities Director, for receiving the Minnesota State High School League's Distinguished Service Award. The award is designed to recognize and celebrate those individuals who go above and beyond in service to the association, along with their leadership and long-term service. 42 Prior Lake High School students were recognized recently at the National Business Honor Society induction ceremony. 17 seniors and 25 juniors met the requirement of an overall GPA of 3.0, completion of at least 3 business classes with a 3.5 GPA, and demonstration of service, leadership, and character. The Prior Lake chapter is the only one in the state of Minnesota and one of only 160 nationwide. Finally, since this will be our last regular board meeting before winter break, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our staff, our students, our parents and families and community for their focused work and dedication to student learning. I hope you all enjoy a slower pace with those that you love over the upcoming winter break. Thank you.
Thank you. Any administration reports? Student rep report?
So last night, both NHS and Student Council went caroling together to raise money for Build a Hand, which is an organization that creates prosthetic hands and sends them to kids in foreign countries who lost their hands in mining accidents. So it's a really cool organization. And it's an NHS project, but they've been asking other groups and organizations to come and help them with their caroling. So you might have some carolers at your doors. So welcome them. You did? Good. Hope they were good singers.
They were awesome.
I wasn't. Last Friday, I had the opportunity to go to attend the Reimagine Minnesota conference with Dr. Stallo and others. The main ideas of this conference were diversity and equity, and more specifically, how to ensure that students of color have the equity that they deserve in education. We heard from 4 students who talked about their experiences and not feeling like they received the same opportunities, in part because of their race and cultural backgrounds in their families. From these students, we learned how important equity in education really is, and we talked about a game plan in order to make our schools more inclusive and a better place where all students have the same opportunities to achieve excellence.
All right. Any board reports this evening? I have one. I too attended the Reimagined Minnesota session, and it was very eye-opening, the student board feedback session. So, okay, on to future events. December 21st through January 1st, there will be no school because of winter break. January 2nd, the classes resume for E through 12. January 8th is our organization and regular school board meeting, and with respect to that, I'd sent you all a note about forwarding the committee assignments you wish for the upcoming year, and we'll forward that to the future board chair. In addition, in front of you should be a comparison of salaries for board members in other districts comparable to ours. So that is some information you can have for our organizational meeting on January 8th. And secondly, and then MSB's annual leadership conference is scheduled for January 11th and 12th. There'll be an early bird session on January 10th that evening. And there's 2 sessions, as I mentioned in my email: designing an effective superintendent evaluation and data privacy and data breaches. Are you prepared? These are 2 good topics that the board should be studying, because we'll be coming up with a new evaluation process for Dr. Stallo. And as we review policy 515 in the near future, we'll need that expertise that they can have from that session. We're going to try to get together before those sessions, if possible, and have some dinner beforehand. So please let Martha know your availability for those sessions and your availability for the leadership conference on the 11th and 12th. In addition, Dennis, we are scheduled to have Dennis on the 26th of February from 4 to 6 before the study session, so please block that time off and be available for that session. I just wanted, in my email, mention that the MSB policy, and therefore our policy, talks about board members should participate and be involved in ongoing training and development. So those are some great opportunities for training and development. So with that, I'm finished with future events, and I will accept a motion for adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting this evening?
So made.
By Stacy. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Lee. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0. This meeting is adjourned.